What is the key to unlocking? Let's try this again. Let's unlock the secret to successfully establishing boundaries without becoming a star-spangled villain. So, because boundaries aren't magical, we can say, I'm setting a boundary and you cannot do this and such. They still can do this and such. We can't control others. Basically, boundaries are just about communication. We're saying, listen, let me back up. So we've already explored, boy, I'm not doing a good job. Let's try this again. We want to figure out a way to set boundaries without becoming a boob, a villain, a control freak, a Sith Lord, if you will. So let's figure out what not to do. Well, we don't want to indulge our yang tendencies. Patriarchy, in the sense of philosophical Taoism, is not literal. It's not about having a penis or not having a penis. It's about, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for being rigid, fearful, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. So being rigid and controlling is not the path to peace. It may create temporarily contrive an analog of peace, but that's like confusing a photograph of food for the real thing. A photograph of food is not going to help your hunger. Do a bait and switch with your cat. Open up some wet food and then give them a photograph of wet food. That cat's going to tear you up. So, what if boundaries, once again, were not a magical tool with which we control others? What if boundary was not about control but awareness? It's simply saying, dude, I want to give you a courtesy reminder that, and don't take this personal. This is not an attack on you, but dude, there's certain type of behavior in my life that's not sustainable. It's not sustainable for my sobriety. It's not sustainable for my sanity. It's not sustainable for my health. And because I don't want to be a drug-crazed fiend, because I don't want to be a beat-faced troll, because I don't want to undermine what health I have left, there's certain behaviors which I need to avoid. There's certain circumstances I need to avoid. And the next time you do thus and such, we're going to have to part ways. Now, I'm not doing this to manipulate you. I'm doing this to inform you. Whether or not you do thus and such is up to you. You are a free moral agent. You can do thus and such. But there's always going to be consequences. Now, if you don't think I'm awesome, if you don't think the sun rises out of my tuchus, that's fine. If you are happy with me not in your life, that's completely fine, and it's utterly understandable. But if you persist in thus and such, I will have to leave, or you will have to leave, or we will have to avoid each other. Once again, it's not you personally, it's just that thing or that circumstance, it's toxic for me, regardless of whether you understand it, regardless of whether you agree with it. This is something I've got to do. So once again, I can't control you, but I feel it's only courteous to let you know what my intentions are. And what we want to do is traverse the path of yin, the path of matriarchy. Once again, not literal matriarchy, but metaphoric matriarchy. The path of being flexible, loving, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. Now, don't make the mistake that I did. In my youth, when I had more enthusiasm than wisdom, I thought that if you just said something with a soft voice and used victim language, that would be in. No, no, it wasn't. It was just a analog of, it was just yang masquerading as an analog of yin. It was just more controlling tendencies, but instead of being actively controlling, it was passively controlling. So let's not do that. Now you could say, well, no shit, Sherlock. I already knew I didn't want to be passive aggressive. I didn't come here to be reminded of what I already know. I came here to learn something else. And now I'm going to tell you something that'll help you to avoid being passive aggressive. Brace yourself for an unsatisfying solution. Here we go. Centered spontaneity. In a few minutes, we'll get into the nitty-gritty and even the physiology of effortless and effective mindfulness and meditation. But here's an overview. Here's the thing. I could hand you a razor blade and say, this is an apple. It doesn't matter whether I'm lying or just confused. If you treat a razor blade like an apple, you're going to wind up in the hospital. Similarly, if someone calls concentration mindfulness, whether they are malevolent or just lazy-minded, it's not going to help you. It's going to make you into a crankpot. No one wants to be a crankpot. So, when we practice effective mindfulness and effortless meditation, one of the amazing fringe benefits is that the area of our brain that lights up when we are full of fear and aggression stops lighting up. And the part of our brain that lights up right around here when we are empathetic, that lights up instead. And so the fringe benefit, so you know you're meditating correctly when you experience love's centered spontaneity. I don't want to sound like this is like pseudo spiritual babble. So let me tell you what I mean by centered spontaneity. On one extreme, we have complete, rigid, button-up tight contrivance. On the other extreme, utter, scattered spontaneity. Like a kitty cat with the zoomies. Woohoo! What's the middle ground? Well, it's a different flavor of spontaneity. Instead of being scattered spontaneity, it's centered spontaneity. And here's the funny thing. Centered spontaneity is like sexual tumescence. You can't stand there naked and command your penis to get erect. Or if you're a woman, you can't stand there naked and command your vagina to be engorged. It's not going to happen. It's a result of a process. For instance, there's a difference between your lover just out of the blue grabbing an erogenous zone versus your lover saying something sweet or funny or playful and snuggling up next to you and kissing you and embracing you and caressing you and starting off in innocent places and then slowly and firmly making their way to erogenous zones, probably slower than you'd like them to, and that gives the blood a chance to beat them there and get fully engorged and ready for the main event. Similarly, if we can agree that sexual tumescence is an indirect process, the same thing works with centered spontaneity. You don't just snap your fingers or act like a rerun of Bewitched and wiggle your nose. Practice mindfulness and meditation correctly, gently, pleasurably, at least for 5 minutes, at least once every 12 hours or so, Make it a daily habit. And within a few days or a few weeks, you'll notice more and more you begin slipping into a flow state, a benevolent flow state. You'll find that your choices and utterances and deeds flow from this benevolent flow state. In the Buddhist scripture, that's sometimes referred to as there's a really good word for it. Expedient means. Love's expedient means. It's not contrived. You don't think about it. It just flows spontaneously. If you want to get superstitious and want to use Sanskrit, you would call it nirmanakaya, or being in the emanated state. Basically, this means we're in a loving flow state. In conclusion, a healthy, effective meditation practice is our generator for the flow state. So we're going to go over the specific idiot-proof instructions for meditation in about 45 seconds. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, full-time, I have studied and practiced and reverse engineered the teachings and techniques and practices of each sect of Taoism and Buddhism so that you wouldn't have to. So that I could become the Yoda to your Luke Skywalker, so that you could quickly and easily become the person that your dog already thinks you are. Welcome to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. Remember, if at any point you have a specific question about Buddhist chanting, Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or their application, simply type your question in great detail in the chat window. You can ask the author of the Song of Enlightenment. You can ask the founder of Dzogchen, and they would agree. You don't need ritual. You don't need recitation. But these things can be useful. Some people really desire, well, thank you, James, that's very kind of you. Some people super desire structure, like a sprinter who has a Pavlovian response both to the sound of the starter's pistol and the sight of the finish line. Lots of people like a book to bookend their practice with a little loving chant in the beginning and a little loving chant at the end. And I find that to be a benign indulgence. So these recitations are not prayers to real or imagined entities. These are simply words we use to exercise the neural pathways responsible for empathy. We're going to begin with a literal recitation set to the triplet chant. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hatred, craving, and clinging by relying on thee. Buddha's example, instructions, and students. These final highlighted bit is so useful over these centuries, over the millennia. It earned the metaphoric nickname of the 3 wish-fulfilling jewels, which we're going to refer to in our final pre-meditation recitation that is much more concise and much more figurative and set to the bookend chant together. May I liberate all beings by relying on the 3 jewels. May I liberate all beings by relying on the 3 jewels. May I liberate all beings by relying on the 3 jewels. So in about the span of 3 minutes or so, I'd like to review the meditation instructions. Whether we call it mindfulness and meditation, or Zen, Proto-Zen, Shan, Dhyana, Mahamudra, Mahasanti, Ati Yoga, Dzogchen, or Trekcho. Mindfulness meditation does not have to be difficult, or even mysterious, or even occult. Let's begin with mindfulness. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we access the sympathetic nervous system. It's so ancient. It's not even in our skull. It's in our spinal cord in the area of our rib cage. It does not support active concentration, but it does support simple perception. And it helps us to perceive vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. That's right, my friends. Welcome to the Lazy Bastard School of Enlightenment. It can be best explained by inhalation's 12-syllable recitation, wherein one might silently and mentally recite, perceiving this very turbulent play of mind. Both the elitists often claim that your mind's got to be peaceful if you want to meditate. And that's what us big boys call a gilded cage. I can only do this in that circumstance. But that's not liberation. That's imprisonment. When you know how to practice mindfulness and meditation correctly, you can do it regardless of your circumstance or your health or your relationship status or what's going on in the 3-pound supercomputer between your ears. I hope that nobody is ever harangued by an emotionally unwell individual. But when you are skilled at mindfulness and meditation in the midst of verbal abuse, you can meditate in the midst of physical assault. And once again, I wish this on no one. But when you're skilled and you're good at this, you can meditate in the midst of assault. You can meditate in the midst of horrendous physical maladies. Once again, I wish you sunshine and rainbows. But when you get good at this, you don't need special circumstances. So what are some of the antics of mind? Mind, because of its sensory organs, can see, hear, experience sensation, taste, and smell. Or I should say touch. There's a nice little vague bit. Mind also can emote, intend, reason, recall, and imagine. Mind can do all these things. So the very intelligent next question is, what do we do with all this stuff? Good question. By the way, I took a bunch of thumbnails today. I took a bunch of selfies for future thumbnails because that's how YouTube works. And because I'm lifting the phone, it looks like my shoulders are my earrings. All glamour, all the time. So the solution to all this stuff is meditation. But how does that work? Every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we access our parasympathetic nervous system, ensconced within the bit of our spinal cord in our pelvis and the bit of the spinal cord in our neck and above. I could be fancy and say things like lumbar and cervical, but why would I want to put on airs? So this parasympathetic nervous system empowers us for both physical relaxation as well as mental release. And that experience is typified by exhalation's 12 syllables of relaxing into mind's non-graspable nature. And fortunately, non-graspability is a figure of speech. We don't have to rigidly believe in it or pseudo-intellectually try to prove it. That is the path of madness. Instead, we can just notice that whenever we relax into our exhalation. Whatever we perceived during the previous inhalation could begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as a vast empty void, as if it was as non-graspable as the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which, although could be quite compelling to the eye, is intangible to the hands. Regardless of how much we might try to reach it, we never pull back a hand full of blue. So that's the key to a lot of Buddhist metaphors. A lot of Buddhist phrases only make sense as metaphors, like selflessness or birthlessness or deathlessness. So there you have it. And by the way, in about 10 minutes from now, you'll know everything you need to know to become a Buddha. Together as a team, let us meditate as profoundly as Qui-Gon Jinn on Naboo, but without the whole pesky getting stabbed by a Sith Lord thing. Because I don't know about you, but I have concluded after years of research that I am allergic to pain. How do I know this? Because it hurts. Let us take off our first imaginary training wheel and switch gears from the 12-syllable exercise to the 3-syllable exercise, wherein during the inhalation we silently and mentally recite "Notice this," and during the exhalation we silently and mentally recite "Relaxing." And just as we inferred during class, when you have a strong experience, instead of suppressing it or indulging it, we label it, not to make it go away, but so that we can harness its momentum, what some people call energy or kinetic energy. So, for instance, if you find yourself imagining something horrible or humorous, imagine relaxing. If you find yourself remembering a song or a book or a thing that really happened or a movie, recollect relaxing. We don't have to search for something, it'll come up all by itself. If nothing comes up, if you experience nothing but the experience of an empty field with a lonely cricket, then notice this relaxing will fit the bill. The older you get, the more pain you experience. Ah, the privilege of a long life. And so if as you sit here you feel subtle, teeny tiny aches and pains, guess what? That's sensation relaxing. I watched a Michael Moore movie called Where to Invade Next. It was wonderful. I wish we had the type of sex education in America that they do in France. I wish we could destigmatize sexual intimacy with oneself, with another, with others. I think we as people would be less hung up, would have less teen pregnancy, and less neurosis. And now we remove the final turning wheel and transition from the 3-syllable exercises to the 1-syllable exercises. Instead of physical sensation, we could use the word form. Instead of emotion, we could use the word feel. Instead of recollection, we could use the word then. Instead of imagine, we could use the word dream. Together as a team, let us chant the 15th verse of the Song of Enlightenment. Let people mock another speaker love you. Let them tire themselves out trying to burn the sky. Hearing the words is like tasting sweet dew. I swallow and suddenly enter the inconceivable. Oh, look at that. Inconceivable. Okay. That's how I find syllables, folks. Together, let's chant. In hateful woods I see a chance for merit. They have become my closest advisors, not letting ridicule make enemies of friends. I show the power of accepting that nothing is born, which is a nickname for letting go. Or perhaps a metaphor. together. Know the words and know the source, do not over focus on the emptiness of wisdom's light of perception and sensation. This is not something I alone have learned. Countless Buddhas have realized this too. Together, let's chant. The lion rose and speaks without fear. Lesser beasts hear and cower in fright. Wild elephants cease their rampaging ways. Sky dragons listen in silent rapture. Our knee-jerk reaction to the Buddha's teachings is what separates the men from the boys, the women from the girls, and the wise from the foolish. Let us seal this evening's practice with a bit of the old chanting. May all beings practice of kind communication, conduct, and calmness feel spontaneous and uncontrived. May everyone be free from misery, may everyone be happy, may no one be separated from the happiness. May everyone have balance from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging freed. If you feel that I have earned it, you can give this live stream a thumbs up. You could help support this channel. In approximately 11 hours or so, I would very much like to return to lead tomorrow's morning meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, this is the way.